Welcome to Centering Conversations, where we dive deep into transformative dialogue with thought leaders, change agents, and visionary minds shaping the future of philanthropic leadership. Each episode, we explore the power of voice, the clarity of vision, and the courage of value-driven leadership. Voice, Vision, Value invites you to join this powerful journey towards impact and inspiration. Detria Austin Everson, I'm so happy to have you on Centering Conversations.
Thank you. I am excited to be here and so grateful for this opportunity to share with you.
Yeah, Toya Nash Randa, we both know she has just been a fantastic partner to work with her work with Voice, Vision, Value, Black women leading in philanthropy. And, she just has provided introduction to such fantastic leaders across the country. And so I'm thrilled to just be in conversation about your work, about how you've used your voice, your vision, the values that guide your work in this discussion today.
Wonderful. And you're right. Toya has been such an amazing connector. She is an outstanding leader, and it is always a joy to meet new people that she makes introduction for.
Yeah. So, we have listeners, and of course I've read your bio and they've heard the bio, but it's always really great for the guests to sort of describe to the audience who they are and what they do in their own voice. And so I'd love it if you would do that.
Okay, wonderful. What a great way to start. I appreciate the opportunity. And first, and foremost, I want to say I am a woman of faith. I try my best and work to be guided by the commitments to God's purpose in my life. It's been, I've had an opportunity to be blessed with many opportunities to serve others. And I really feel like that calling has been the cornerstone of my journey in life. I currently serve, as many people know from the bio, that I serve as the CEO and president of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. And this work really feels like an extension of what I think of as my own personal ministry. I have the opportunity to uplift communities, foster justice, create opportunities for those who need it the most. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy about it. At my core, I feel as though I am a servant leader, a lifelong learner, and someone deeply committed to living out my principles of love, faith, and service every day.
Did you evolve into that clarity of purpose and faith, or were you a young person that was clear? Like, how has that evolved over your career?
That's evolved starting from my parents. I was raised in a small town in Arkansas, and my mother was a social worker, a career social worker, and my father was a Vietnam veteran who happened to be a serial entrepreneur. So I tell people I was born in between the crossroads of altruism and ingenuity. And so between both of them, my father from a very rural part of Arkansas worked hard. And I think his work ethic is one of the things I picked up most. My mother came from a different socioeconomic class and, tended to focus more on service and giving and being available to other people. And so I think the mixture of both of those actually is really what shaped me. And so from their example, then I have had to live life. And I think life provides ample opportunity for you to exercise or grow and renew your faith as you go through this journey. So for me, it's been beginning with parental upbringing and then through my life experience that has shaped me into who I am today.
I hope this question doesn't seem repetitive, but I've been in a lot of questions about how faith enters into my own leadership. It's funny because one of the questions that will often come up is that people sort of see it, but it sits alongside of them at work, like this idea of bringing all of your values and who you are into the workspace. The language of that, the opportunity to do that has, it seems like it has changed over the course of my own career. And, have you always felt comfortable enough to bring your whole self into work?
I will say that I felt comfortable bringing myself into work, but how that may have been expressed might have been different. I believe, early in life, I heard someone say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And so I've tried my best to make sure that my lifestyle provided evangelism for others. And while I've been at work, I've tried to lead with the values and operate, even from my choice of words to how I show up, to my reactions, my responses. I want to be sure that what I demonstrate and the example I set for other people around me has pretty much spoken my values before I ever had to open my mouth or mention or tell anybody. Because quite frankly, I think that's the right way that it should show up. And for me, it has been, I'll say easy, because I've made a very firm commitment early in life that I wanted to always do what my parents said. When you leave this house, you represent this family. And so while, I have gone through life and gotten married, so my name has changed, but I feel like I am still representing the family and community that really raised me and supports me today. And for me, it's important that I feel like they would be proud in every interaction I've had at work. So it has been easy because I've made that commitment.
Your career, as I know it, has largely been in spaces around social justice. And, you said you were from Arkansas?
Yes.
I don't know why I lost it already because you know what? My grandmother is from Menifee.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and so when you said that, that came up for me. And my grandmother was born in 1915.
Mm.
And she died a few years back, but she never really talked too much about her experiences in the South. Like it was very, very painful. Obviously, we know that the depth, many of us know the history that existed there, especially for Black folks. But was it, these issues of social justice, were you just entrenched with that? Like I have a vision of what it means to live in that space because of my grandmother, and like the legacy and the storytelling feels like it would be really different there than what I experienced in Minnesota.
Mhm.
So was there a piece of that informed where you're at, or what was that experience like?
Be honest with you, I left Arkansas and my real goal was to do everything besides become my parents. And I tell people I've become them. And so my mother, who's a social worker who cares, has fought for the voiceless children of the state of Arkansas for years. I've watched her advocacy, and really, I did not even realize that watching her and what she was doing and the conversation she was having, and just her intentionality around making sure children were safe and loved and respected, and in environments where they could thrive, was really what I walked away with. And I felt like that was just what everybody should have in life. And so I think part of that. But my grandmother, my father's mother, did share with me stories of how, growing up, not only my grandmother, but most of my family. But my grandmother gave me one particular story that always resonates with me when she talks about she's the wife, of her husband, but mother of 13 children. And she would talk to me about how she would save diligently a little bit of money so my grandfather could pay the poll tax to vote in Arkansas. And so it was quite interesting to me that here this woman was who was, working to feed, 13 children. And one of the most important things for her to do, every year was to be sure she put aside. I'm sure that was a very big sacrifice for her, but it was important for her to do. And she wanted to make sure her grandchildren knew and understood that story. Now, my father and my mother are, they grew up, they were young in the 60s and 70s. So they have their own experiences over their life careers and things that they have shared with me at times when they thought it was appropriate for me to understand some of the challenges they too navigated growing up in Arkansas. And then also sharing with me stories of my mother's grandfather, who was my grandfather, who actually was a person who was actively involved, in the civil rights movement and betterment for the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, which is where my mother grew up. And I think all of those stories help me understand. I think that's why it's important for us to continue to tell stories and share history orally as much as we can with those who are younger and around us, because it does help you identify where your values lie. And for me, the examples of serving and being a voice for other people stuck with me very early in life, but also the resilience and the sacrifice that it often takes to make real change or to push for real change was something that I learned a little bit about too.
Yeah. Those listening that are unfamiliar with what a poll tax is, could you say more about what that is?
Well, in the South, it was one of the tactics and ways in which individuals were required to. It was at that time it may have been looked at and probably was a barrier for individuals, particularly minorities and others who may not have been had the means in order to vote. And it was one of the ways in which it was just, like I said, another barrier that was put in place that was trying to thwart the efforts of individuals who had, earned the right to vote and had the ability to vote, but one more barrier to put in place, because if you did not have the money, it didn't matter that you were registered and could vote. If you didn't have the money, it was another way to keep you from voting. And so I think as we look at voter suppression and things, I would say it was a voter suppression tactic of the day.
Yeah, and now you have the opportunity to lead an organization of one of our heroes, certainly one of mine, but one of the icons in African American community, and really more broadly than that, but certainly for us, that as a young boy, I used I can almost hear his voice in my head as a young boy. Felt convicted to make sure that we all had the rights, the opportunities and the liberties that everyone else had, and really sacrificed his entire life. And, I think about him around voting rights and voter suppression, and the story that we were just sharing, and seeing some of that still continue just feels painful for me, but certainly for the legacy of so many people that committed their lives or lost their lives for that simple right. And so, what is it like leading something with their names on it?
It's a blessing and a burden at the same time. A blessing because it has provided me with the opportunity to do a lot of extensive research, more than I probably would have not serving in this role, and really understanding the young John Lewis. We all celebrate and know Congressman Lewis as he, came to be. But the young John Lewis is a person I think we find in many of us who want to make things better in life. And the tenacity, the oftentimes lonely journey of making a decision that takes you into places where you can't just tell all your friends, just come follow me, because it's a conviction. And it's something that the people around him were equally as committed to. And I'm grateful that, when he was in Nashville, in the Nashville student movement, is really where Congressman Lewis really started his real strong sense of advocacy, being diligently leading a lot of student efforts to ensure that the city of Nashville became more and more desegregated, and the new laws that had been put in place were actually operating in that city, whereas individuals could be served at lunch counters, with all races, and they could enter the movie theaters, and they could enter, and then the interstate transportation systems. And so I think when I look back and think about the work and what he gave at such a young age, he was not concerned or bothered by how many likes he got. He did not wake up trying to figure out who, was tagging him in stuff. Of course, those technologies were not there at that time. But I think I still understand that within his own personal journey, he was willing to be a lone voice if that's what it took to realize what he believed the world could become. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. It is a huge weight, because my goal is to ensure that we continue to make sure students of these days understand that they too have that same power to make our world a better place, and to shape it, and to be led by strong values of faith and love and respect for all human.
So, like in my head right now, I have the story that you just shared of your grandmother with the 13 kids. And often we see leadership as positional
Mm-hmm.
and loud. And really, sometimes it's just the ability to see a vision and to take action that could be small, that provides, opportunity, that shapes futures, right? That even that story, I can imagine, lives on in your family through the generation of the importance of voting. And it was so important that your grandmother put money up. And, for John Lewis, even as a young person, he saw beyond sort of his own individual success to the success of those that looked like him, to the success of a country. And those moments, require sometimes courage when other people may not, to your point, see the vision or see beyond sort of their own set of circumstances. I imagine that you have also had to navigate that in your career. Do you have a particular moment that really where you were sort of standing out there and had a vision that maybe wasn't supported in the beginning? And what lessons might you be able to share from that?
Well, there are many moments where I've had, I would say, a fork in the road and an opportunity to make a strong choice one way or the other. And one was in one of my career transitions. I had been introduced to an organization that I thought did stellar work when it came to supporting individuals who wanted to achieve the American dream of home ownership. And I was in a very promising healthcare management career at that time, but I was struck by the work of this organization to the point that I became intrigued by them. And I literally pushed and called and advocated that the CEO, take a meeting with me so I could learn more and figure out how I could help expand this program because I learned about it in one area, but it was not in my home state of Arkansas. And it was a very strong desire of mine to see them open an office there. I pushed and pushed and pushed and lobbied for probably about 3 to 6 months before I actually got a meeting with the CEO of the organization and had a chance to travel to meet both he and his wife and talk about why I thought they needed to open an office in my home state of Arkansas. And through some string of conversations, a lot of faith and advocating, they decided to do so. And really, it was one of those times where my family was like, you're leaving a healthcare career that you've done all this background and training, your degrees are in this, and you want to launch into this advocacy organization that helps with home ownership. And for me, it was one of those times where I was very, very focused and intentional about wanting to make a difference. And I knew I could make a difference in healthcare, but this felt like something that I should be tied to. And so through faith, I was able to push through, get the office open, move into leadership roles for the organization, and eventually became the chief operating officer for the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. So for me, it was one of those opportunities where I felt a need to bring a service to a community. And through that, I found a new career.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that part of the strand of this particular conversation that we're in now is really about how we do use our voice and our vision. And, there's a lot of people that are sitting in these transition places or they're feeling dissatisfied or they're seeing sort of where the country is and wanting to do more. And sometimes more is like at this population level, like I want to solve this big thing. And often it is like the daily things, the decisions to move, to follow your convictions, to do that. And so I hope that in the telling of those couple of stories that we can sort of push someone who's on the edge of making that phone call that you made, right? That just feels like they want to do a little bit more. It's just a season, I think, that we can all do a little bit more.
Agree. I mean, I think, transition is, I mean, it's a natural part of our growth and our life experiences. We're going to experience transition whether we are intentional about the transition or not. I call it voluntary or involuntary transition. It is going to take place. And one of the things I know at times it can make people feel very overwhelmed when that transition, particularly if it's a transition that you did not intend. My advice for people is to really just stay grounded in your own values and your own purpose. Really, for me, I seek God's guidance in prayer, and I trust the path ahead is being prepared, for me. And so I invite people to always believe that wherever you're going, there is a purpose in it. And then surround yourself with people who uplift and challenge you to grow. You want to make sure you're in environments that are going to improve you, and the people around you want to see you at your best. And remember, every inflection point, that we have is an opportunity for your own personal transformation. So I tell people, embrace it. It's a chance to realign with your calling, kind of redefine your own goals, and to step into the next season of your life with a good bit of faith and courage. So look forward to transitions.
Yeah, I love that. And, the other thing about our country and the work that we have both chosen to be in is that we're working every day to improve conditions.
Mhm.
And then things happen in our country that feel like they take us back. And one of our last guests was Lauren Castile, Whitney Young's daughter.
Mm.
And she was sharing with me that she feels like we have gone backwards
Mm.
despite everything, right? And so even when I'm thinking about voter suppression, we still have a lot of issues that are going on, and tactics to discourage people and across this country, varied by state, but across this country. But we also have people that are frustrated with the system and they don't believe that they have a voice. And so, the fighting for voter rights that happened at one point, and now we have particularly young folks that feel like doesn't matter. And I just want to see if you have a perspective on perhaps why it still matters,
Mm-hmm.
why we continue to push forward in the work, even if sometimes it slips backwards to jump forward, that the line isn't continuously growing towards better, but that the more of us that are in the work, I think the better.
I agree. I'm reminded of just another quote, which is so appropriate from Congressman Lewis. And it was that, democracy is not a state,
Mm.
it's an action. So I'll tell you that, in thinking about what you've just asked, I really think diligently about the quote from Congressman Lewis. It speaks to democracy not being a state, but it
Mm.
is an ongoing thing that each generation has an opportunity to fight for and to ensure. And so I think we're at that point now in our, current state of our American democracy. We have the chance, and this generation will have to decide what democracy looks like, for us. We have to decide if our values are for everyone to be included and at the table and have opportunity and access to their God-given rights to live a life in the pursuit of happiness, or if we want the society to be where we have the voices that would keep us divided to have the strongest voice and the final say so. That is going to be decided by this generation. And so I say people need to get ready. Your voice matters. Roll up your sleeves, go to work on issues, and keep it local. Don't think about what you need to change so far away across the United States. Think about what you need to change every day, starting in your own community, starting in your own employer, starting in your own neighborhood, in your own job environment. There are things we can do in your own local city jurisdiction, your county, and your state. If we start there, and if all the citizens who truly believe in a better tomorrow would really use their voice, I promise you, there's nothing but positivity that can come out of it.
Do you think that equity and justice can have a place in today's sort of democracy?
I think it has to. We have to be very, very intentional about there being equity for others. We are not going to prevail as a country unless we allow there to be an opportunity for all people to use all their talents for us to make this country as great as it can be. And we are competing on a global world, right? Stage right now. This is not just about what's happening on one coast or another. This is about how this country shows up across the world. And that's not going to happen with only a few people, only a few talents centered around the table. And we're not going to get there without there being true equity for individuals to take part in, the true, dream that America is for all people, for freedom and the pursuit of life and liberty. And I believe that equity and justice are a must right now. And it is going to be those who believe in it speaking up. This is not a time to be quiet about it. It's not a time to be passive. It's a time to be active in every way possible to ensure that that takes place.
And it's interesting, like, so, John Lewis, I'm going to go back to that for a second, had there's such clarity for me in terms of what his contributions were. And so you're running a foundation that holds his name. And, I think about Good Trouble. I think about the Pettus Bridge. Like, I think about all of these things. But there's sort of this opportunity, or the conditions of today, where there might be some things that feel familiar, they're different. It's different, and things are evolving very quickly. So how do you hold as a leader sort of the legacy of a person, a legacy of a community, while bringing your own vision for the future into that space? How do you hold that? And yeah, how do you hold it? That's the question.
Well, I hold it, thank God, with a very strong board of directors and other supporters and people around me to do this work. we are not alone. The foundation was founded by Congressman Lewis in 2017 prior to his passing. And, his intention was not that we become him, but that we make sure that people learn the lessons that he hoped his life would share with other people. So part of our requirement is to make sure we first and foremost uphold the education and the legacy of sharing the history of civil rights, of African American history in our country. And number two, that's one of the things that leads us to the archiving project that we're working on right now. We're working to archive and digitize and curate information about Congressman Lewis's congressional history, and then look forward to moving that into a lot more of his body of work from a young man forward. And I think what we have to realize first and foremost is that we're going to be supportive and we're going to use our voice and we're going to be in places we need to. But as a nonprofit, my goal is first education and making sure to uphold the legacy. The work is kind of straightforward. The work is kind of centered around youth. Congressman Lewis believed in making sure we amplify the voices of young generations. We want to make sure that the programs that we create, our scholarship programs, our internships, everything that we do here at the foundation is guided to making sure people feel empowered, but they're also inspired by the life that he lived, which he set a strong example for. Some of our work stems with working with the United States Institute of Peace. We've got a number of peace fellows across the world who actually come here to learn about Congressman Lewis's legacy, study the civil rights movement, and take those things back into their country, which is important because they're on peacemaking efforts in their own communities. We also have young programs that we deal with our college students here in the local area and beyond. Some of them are working on social justice issues that we support and make sure that we are engaging them and helping them to understand the legacy of Congressman Lewis and what the generation prior to them, made their purpose and their calling, so they can feel inspired that their voices matter and they need to continue with the programs and projects that they are leading to help make improvements one issue at a time. And I think the fact that we continue to do both of those things, educating, making sure we are providing opportunities for people to learn and grow from this legacy, but then making sure we are also engaging our young people, because truly it is the youth that are going to make the biggest difference in our future. We want to be sure they feel empowered so that their voice actually matters.
What are some of the lessons from the civil rights movement that you think young people or any of us really would benefit from understanding or applying?
I think unity. One of the things that I saw as I studied Congressman Lewis is from the National Student Movement to the formation of SNCC to just the other places that he found himself in service in community was the unity that it took and the discipline. So I would say unity and discipline. I talk about the fact that we need to work on and help develop a new resilient and sustainable younger generation. When I think about the preparation that it took for Congressman Lewis and those who were with him to get ready to go out and do sit-ins or to do marches or to lead, picketing stores and just whatever things they used as their tactics during that time, it took discipline. One, to show up and agree that you would follow the nonviolent, process and format that they had decided. Number two, that you would follow the instructions of whatever leader from some of their teachers who were training them in this nonviolent philosophy. And number three, that you would also be there in unity with your colleagues. Unity to the point that when they all agreed, when they were arrested, to not bail themselves out, but to sit there and not reward the jail system by paying them. I mean, the dedication and discipline and unity that it took for them all to agree to those terms and stick with it long enough to make significant impact is really what stands out for me from that time.
I imagine that to get to that level of unity took a number of conversations. I imagine that there were heated deliberations, navigation of other people's expectations, including their parents, that, sometimes we can memorialize the end of the story as though that is the story. Mm-hmm. And we're in this climate now that, we sort of cancel out people that disagree, or we lose it on the how we get there. We might have the same end goal, but we don't know how to compromise always on the strategy. And so we keep fractioning out. And so I think this idea of unity is so much more interesting because it's the journey to get there that really matters quite a bit.
It is. It is, and you don't go alone when you're making a major impact and change like this. And there was very rigorous debate, as I call it, and they may have called them heated arguments or during that time. But there was a lot of decisions about whether or not the nonviolent position was the right one to have. Did nonviolence really make a difference, and was it just a passive religious antidote that people were using, so to speak? And there were people who were deeply ingrained in what they had learned through Gandhi and what Dr. King espoused about nonviolence being the way of social change. But also, there were individuals who felt like they should retaliate, and there were times where those positions came into conflict. And there were times where they had to, go separate ways for various reasons. But I think in the end, it was important that for the overall overwhelming majority of people who participated at that time, that nonviolence was the example. And it is something that it did take personal discipline and personal, intentional behaviors that would allow you to stay the course. Because be very clear, it was very difficult for what they experienced, being jailed, mistreated, mishandled, hit, bruised, beaten. Those are not things that are easy to sit here and think about. My ancestors and people before us who, from various communities who came together and participated in. And I think I still go back to the fact that it was the fact that they maintained a strong sense of unity because they believed in something so much greater than themselves, to the point of personal self-sacrifice to get there, so this generation could realize some of those benefits.
You were the founding executive director of the Martin Luther King Senior Community Resource Collaborative. So, just another giant, and also another man.
Yes. Yes. Not so well. I will not say he's not so well known, but I will say sometimes I believe that the father of Dr. King, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., who the organization was named after, it was a wonderful foundation and nonprofit that was created by the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. I had the pleasure of being able to be asked to help stand up that organization and led it for almost 9 years before moving into this role. And it was an opportunity for me to really have a more of an entrenchment in the King family legacy and understanding, that many people look at the work and the output of Dr. King, but they don't think about, who raised him and where he came from and what community shaped him into who we now know him to be, but also where that thought process. And I'm excited to have learned about Dr. King's father, Martin Luther King Sr., Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., because he set the example. He was fighting for teachers, pay to increase in Atlanta. He was, advocating and pushing for, schools. And he was also leading, efforts to make sure people understood home ownership was the way, and served on a bank board. And, he was so very active and vocal and, leading voting rights, marches when Dr. King was a child. And so the things that we see Dr. King go out and do across the world were really shaped by his family. And it was a joy to get to know that legacy and be able to stand up the work. Now, Dr. King's father was also known as the go-to person. So while he pastored Ebenezer Baptist Church for over 40 some years, very long tenure there, he was known as the go-to person. And so the organization that we created, the Martin Luther King Senior Collaborative, was actually to pay homage to the work he did in the community. So we did a lot of direct service, helping families who were living at and below the poverty level to ensure that we provided opportunities and helped them transcend generational poverty. And so it was very, very rewarding work and exciting. And there's an opportunity for me to grow deeper in history and understanding the resilience, of a family legacy such as the Kings.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I did automatically go to junior, even though I read senior. And I've been to that church, and I tell folks that, I've often tried to describe what it feels like when I go to places like Atlanta, or even when I travel to places that are predominantly Black, and to be able to go there and see places of historic significance, or see streets named after people that look like me. I mean, there's just something that in some ways I feel like I missed
Mm.
living here. There's something about it that brings a great deal of pride and connection. And I know that we don't all get to experience it in the same ways. But so I have these sort of visions of what it means. And a lot of my thoughts about the civil rights movement are shaped by the men, the stories of the men that those stories have been told over and over. And I think you just talked about the family legacy and the people behind them, which includes the women and the women of the civil rights movement. I'm wondering if you have any context that you would like to say about either the women of the movement or what it's like for you as a woman running these organizations that have been named after these legends.
Well, I will tell you, it is something that is not missed by many people. And when I had the International Peace Fellows here this past summer, just the fact of learning the civil rights movement, they thought it was absolutely monumental that an African American female would run such an organization as this, because, they thought about just even looking at the civil rights movement and how it was mostly men who were at the forefront. When you look at the big six, the number of the people who were the main speakers at the March on Washington, it was the big six people always talk about. And, the women had very, much smaller roles, not insignificant roles, but much smaller roles on program for that day. And that's one of the largest national representation of the civil rights movement, people coming together. And it has been exciting because I intentionally try my best to learn more about the women. I am grateful for the time I spent working and building that nonprofit with Ebenezer Baptist Church, because it sits right across the street from the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And the King Center itself, the very fact that it's in existence is because of Coretta Scott King. I look at her fingerprints that are all over that neighborhood. Mrs. King created the Historic District Development Corporation, which is an organization that's like a CDC in the neighborhood that owned property and was a part of the community development. There are things that, the women, whether they had significant roles or were behind the scenes, really poured into and were guides and supports and advisors for the men who may have gone out and enacted a lot of the actions. But I also think back to what I've learned about Mrs. Lillian Miles Lewis. She was from California. Mrs. Lewis had already participated in the Peace Corps and served in Africa well before she moved to Atlanta and met John Lewis. And so in her own right, she was a woman who was very learned. They talk about how much she read, how smart she was, and just how focused and intentional she was about the civil rights movement, to the point that when she moved to Atlanta, she served as librarian at Clark Atlanta University throughout her entire career. So reading and education were some of the cornerstones of the legacy she leaves behind. But also, everyone I've mentioned says she was one of the strongest and most prolific advisor for John Lewis as he moved into running for office for city council in Atlanta, where he, did not win the first race, but he won the second one. And then also extremely important in his tenure as a congressman. And so I believe that we see the tentacles and the fingerprints of the women of the movement all over everything. We just don't realize it. It is time for us to take more time to really dive in and understand their legacies and their stories behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. You are forwarding their legacy while creating your own. Have you thought about what you want your legacy of leadership to be?
Mm. Thinking about my legacy, it's interesting because I am so in awe of the people whose legacies I've had the chance to represent and support and to share. And, I feel extremely dwarfed in that, to think about my legacy when it comes to these individuals. I'm still learning more and more every day about just how they shape the world and my life as I know it. But if I had to think about, a legacy for me, I'm reminded again of, John and Lillian Lewis. I mean, their lifelong commitment to justice and education and equality, rings true for me. My hope is to truly carry forward, a torch by ensuring that this foundation can inspire future generations. But I want to think that my work will empower individuals, especially those in marginalized communities, to believe in their potential and to act boldly in pursuit of justice and equity. Whether, we do our work here through scholarships, community initiatives, and other things, I hope to create a legacy where the values of faith, service, and love are truly remembered in any endeavor that I've undertaken.
Mm-hmm. And, if I can just, ask a couple more questions about your leadership. And, I'm always very curious about sort of the most impactful leadership, either advice or lesson that you've learned. Do you have anything that comes immediately to mind when you think about that question?
I do. It is being willing to be taught by everyone. I have learned so much in leadership roles. And one of the things that I've learned most is to listen to everyone on my team and be sure their voice is at the table. When I have been at what I would consider some of my peak leadership moments where we have surmounted what I would think of insurmountable goals or achieved things that I knew it took strong grit and resilience to do, it has truly been because I allowed every voice around the table to help me in final leadership decisions and to be able to add value from their own unique perspective. And for me, it is listening and engaging everyone that you have the possibility to engage, but also being a lifelong learner. Those two things at the times when I have used it the most have brought about some of the best outcomes in my career as a leader.
Mm-hmm. And, circling back to voice, vision, value, Black women leading in philanthropy, I think, for me, the best thing about this conversation series has been to, one, better understand what we're navigating as women, as
Mhm.
Black women, and the distinct ways in which we bring value and vision and voice to all the spaces that we live in and work in. And I wonder if you have sort of perspective on the strength of Black women leadership, particularly at a time such as this.
You know, um, I do think about it. I think the fact that we're not new to this, you know, um, Black women have had to be resilient through the entire history of America. America is about to be 250 years old, the experiment as they call it. And ever since, she has been into being, Black women have been at the focal point of not only their communities and their families, but other families. We have helped to shape children for generations, both our children and other people's children. We have had to carry the responsibility of supporting our families and other families. And I believe that that is ingrained in our DNA, whether we like it or not. We have a very strong sense of resilience, but I will say I also believe we have a very strong sense of faith. I believe that it stems from our ability to maintain hope. I strongly believe that the reason we have been successful, the reason Black women have been able to, go through all of the things that we've experienced in our lives here, particularly in America, is that we maintain hope. Hope, as we know through our faith, they say faith is the substance of things hoped for, and I believe that hope is the part that keeps pushing us forward. And so, no matter what we find ourselves in, it is the ability to draw upon that hope to move forward.
I was working at a foundation, and one of the values that we spent the most time sort of deliberating and really sort of arguing through was this idea of where we landed was hope is essential.
Mm,
And I
yes,
like to talk about hope because I think that part of the argument was that hope is passive. And I see you shaking your head. So, like, how
yes,
do you see that word, right? Because it's like, is it unfounded? Is it unsubstantiated? Is it pipe dreams? Like, what is the value of hope?
yes, yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, hope is the strongest currency that I use today. It is truly the way. I mean, I draw strength from just the fact that, in scripture from my own personal walk in life and an unwavering belief that God is always in control, even in our most uncertain times, I constantly remind myself that he is always in control. I find hope in the people I serve. I mean, their resilience over my career, the courage I have watched people, exude, their stories of triumph remind me of the potential of the good that this world still has to offer. And I refuse to let go of my hope. Lastly, I maintain, hope in even the smallest of victories. So I tell people, celebrating as I go along my process and truly trusting, that with God's guidance, the seeds that we plant today will grow into something extraordinary. So I want people to know, continue to plant seeds of hope in your own heart and definitely in the heart of young people around you.
I think I have one more question that you just raised for me, which is this thing of celebration. And I think that,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes as women, or those of us that have been working in areas around justice and community, like the issues sometimes dominate our minds, right? And so I think this is where hope is sort of a necessary actor in our
Yes.
leadership. But I think that we sometimes feel the burden
Mm.
of holding these spaces, right? Of holding hope, of holding things together, of being the glue. And I don't know if we're always as good as celebrating the daily, the small wins. Sometimes I know even for myself, sometimes it's not that I don't recognize it when it happens, but as soon as I see it, I can be on to, okay, the next step is this. And I have gotten better at being able to say, today was a good day. We didn't get as far as we
Mm.
needed to get to, but man, it was a good day. And it gives me enough energy to get through tomorrow. And so where does celebration fit in your leadership?
You know what? It is something that I learned early in my career, and I'm very grateful for it. I learned that you need to stop and celebrate when you reach, because we can set these goals, and there's short term, midterm, long term, and obviously major milestones that we set for ourselves. But every time you reach something, even as small as this, celebrate that, because the energy that you build up and the excitement inside yourself that comes from taking a moment to realize you just made an accomplishment, or you were able to get to a point that you were not before, that in itself does something psychologically for us and feeds us the way we need to. And if we continue to push forward and just step over our own celebrations, one, we don't even know that it's important for other people to celebrate when we have made successes. So if you find yourself in work environments and you don't allow yourself to take a moment and bask in what you've accomplished, you will make people feel like what you've done is just diminished or very small. Every accomplishment is major to me. And I learned early to celebrate little things. And you know what? We got away from this as we grow older, and we had to pick it back up. At least I did. When you're younger and you have a child around you and they do the smallest of things and you go, yay, great job. You do that because you want them to understand the love and joy of feeling accomplished. And that's something that I think we let go somewhere. And then we have to find a way to pick it back up. And I want us to continue to do it as much as we can and celebrate the smallest of things that happened for us, particularly as we go through work, because work is always going to be there for us to continue to accomplish more and more and more. But we rob ourselves, of that extra boost. And that is where you can feed your own hope by celebrating as you go along the journey.
When we think about triumph, right? Like I'm getting ready to go down to Alabama, and not, in a couple months, and in the Equal Justice Institute. And for some people, they only see the trauma, the experience and the trauma of it. And I don't know why I see the triumph. I see the survival. I see the leadership of our community in that space. And there's these George Floyd Square is where I live, and people go there and it's like it was so tragic, and it was.
Yes, that's
It
true.
was like there is no other way to say it, but I just don't know if living in only the tragic story without seeing the leadership that emerges, the
Mm-hmm.
change that happens, that was not compromised in people's body where no matter how scared they were, they're like, we have to find a better tomorrow. So
Yes.
anytime I'm in those spaces, that's what I see is all of the people that
Yes.
decided to move that pain into action. And it
Yes.
is so inspiring to me.
Yes, as it should. I think a lot of times we continue to celebrate the trauma, or we have these memorials to the trauma of something that took place. And while those activities and events are very significant and very big, major moments in our history in America, we also have to look at the triumph that came from what it took to get through that and to move to a better place. And think about the communities of people who were there before actually the traumatic experience took place. You know, as I think about the work in, looking at Selma, Alabama, which we will celebrate soon, we always, and they're coming up on the road to 60, as they call it, for the 60th celebration or acknowledgement of the Bloody Sunday occurrence. And one of the things we have to also remind ourselves, there was a resilient community there that was fighting for simple human dignity, human rights to be able to have the right to vote. And there's a triumph in that. And the tragedy was the occurrences that took place for those who did not believe in that, or those who thought less of our community at that time. But the triumph is what I celebrate every day. What has happened because of the resilience of that community at that time, the people who, put themselves on the line for a better tomorrow, and then the wonderful outcomes of things that we've accomplished since that moment. And we deserve to celebrate the triumphs.
Absolutely. So I love what you just said. And, this has been just a delightful conversation. But before we go, I want to just ask if there's anything that you are just excited about, any projects that you're coming up that you'd like to share with us.
Well, there are many, definitely in work. There's always some great work that we're doing around the foundation. But on a personal side, I will share that for a number of years, I have been, I think, writing a book, and I was really taking down notes and jotting through experiences, and really just to be able to appreciate and bask in just the journey that I've had along the way and the opportunities that God has given me to serve others and to witness what service looks like, whether I am the one giving it or receiving it, and how that service has really shaped my life. And so I am super excited about the project of my new book that'll come out this year called Service is a Superpower. And so I am very, very excited to share that, because it is a culmination of many experiences that have really blessed me tremendously and given more, more purpose to my walk and my journey and the opportunities God has placed before me.
Yeah, and on your website it says transforming lives through service is the power of giving and receiving. There's times like as a leader, you are also learning. Like you're the follower and you're the leader. That's what I'm trying to say. And sometimes you're the giver and you're getting something. Like I think we sometimes look at life as though it's one dimensional. And it's like I'm the one that's doing, and you don't even realize how much you're giving. And this whole thing around superpower, which is like a popular question right now, like what's your superpower? And so I love this context. And so how did you get to the name of that is my question. And then the next question is, if people want to learn more about it, where do they go?
So I got to it was through having a mother that's a social worker that used words that have resonated with me throughout my life. I questioned her, and I'll talk about this in the book as the example of when I questioned her one time of whether or not I was going to do anything really major or exciting or big in life. And I had this big question mark as a young girl about, how do you become a person that does something great or is amazing. And my mother, because I think she, as a social worker, did not want to put this unnecessary weight on a child who was barely tipping into her middle school age and really shatter my little ego and everything. She said, babe, remember, just like Dr. King said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And so I think, and she reiterated that to me several times just to be sure I got it and understood that it wasn't about what title I ended up with. It wasn't about the salary that I, amassed. It wasn't about, the trinkets I picked up along the way or things I could own or travel or whatever. It was really about my greatness came through my ability to serve. And I have been working to shape that throughout my entire life. And I think as I work and move forward, that comes back up to me all the time about this service. And I have watched, and I truly believe that levels of service that I have been able to witness and receive has been the actual superpower that move things forward towards positive outcomes. And so I'm not thinking about, superpower like some out of space thing. It really is the quiet force that makes good happen.
I love it.
So yes, and people can find it. I have a link. It's on DetriaAustinEverson.com. And when you go there, we have people who are getting ready to sign up. We're going to announce when the release comes out. And hopefully for your listeners, they will be one of the first few people to understand and get the chance to get a copy of it. So thank you so much for allowing me to share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on Centering Conversations. It was a delight to speak with you. That's it for this episode of Centering Conversations. Thank you for tuning in and centering yourself with us today. Remember, your voice has power, your vision has purpose, and your values guide your leadership and the way forward. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected for more conversations that inspire, ignite, and empower. Until next time, keep calling forth your purpose and centering your power.